Welcome to our fourth Fall Women's Leadership Forum titled Strengthening Your Emotional Health as Women. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, founding director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I'm the host and will be the panel moderator today. This event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents first by producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. So I would like to thank our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, UEN, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. I'd like to get us going today by introducing our three panelists. I feel very fortunate to have each of them with us today. I'll start with Dr. Julie Hanks. She is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist with nearly 30 years experience providing a safe place for healing conversations that educate and empower women to prioritize their dreams, revolutionize their families, and personalize their faith. And she's the founder and director of Wasatch Family Therapy, an outpatient therapy clinic, and also the author of The Burnout Cure and Assertiveness Guide for Women. And Dr. Hanks is a local and national media contributor, a coach, a private practice consultant, and an award-winning performing songwriter. Dr. Hanks hosts the Ask Dr. Julie Hanks podcast and creates online courses and programs that help women improve their mental health and successfully navigate motherhood, relationships, and faith. A native Californian, Hanks currently lives with her family in Sandy, Utah. And second, Tiffany Roe. She is a clinical mental health counselor, CEO, entrepreneur, and award-winning psychology teacher. And she's also a speaker and has a really strong mission to make therapy cool. I love that. She really enjoys being in the mental health game, I'll say. Tiffany is revolutionizing modern mental health by sharing her therapy thoughts on Instagram, offering courses on tiffanyroe.com and spreading education and real psychological tools on the Therapy Thoughts podcast. And she works to help people make peace with mind, body, and food. And in her own words, feel, deal, and heal. And Melanie Davis is a clinical mental health counselor who has strived to create positive landscape for the diverse community of Utah to seek mental health care with a holistic emphasis on treating anxiety, depression, attention-related disorders, and racial trauma. She's the founder of Planted Healing Mental Health Practice, co-founder of the Continuum Mind-Body Collaborative, and co-founder of the Black Clinicians Practitioner Group. Melanie is a highly regarded speaker, educator, child advocate, and psychotherapist. In addition to being experienced in child and family therapy and a presenter as well, she frequently appears on local media as an expert for those topics. Following the completion of her undergraduate degree in sociology from the University of Utah, Melanie worked with varying clinical settings before going on to complete her Master's of Science in Mental Health Counseling at the University of Phoenix. And she has also completed advanced training through the John F. Kennedy University. And Melanie was recently accepted, good for you, Melanie, into the George Washington University School of Medicine Doctoral of Health Sciences program. So that's a little bit about the background. As you think about maybe questions you want to start asking as we get into this panel, you're welcome to put questions in the Q&A in Zoom through the presentation today. And I'll be watching, our panelists will be watching, we'll pull them in. We have about an hour, a little more than an hour to get into many of these topics. So I want to just jump right in here and ask why do you do the work you do And why is this topic so important for women to explore, how to strengthen our mental health? Tiffany, would you jump in and start?
Yeah, I love empowering women to live their authentic selves fully. And so emotional health is part of that. Empowering women includes emotional health, mental health. And we have all been socialized to not do that. We're socialized to caretake others, to neglect self, to ignore needs. And many times we lose ourselves and our identity and our wellness in that process. So it's so important for women to identify their needs, nurture those, build boundaries, take on self-care, and really step into their unique power. And I would, define mental health and emotional health as women understanding their relationship to their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, and being able to be intentional about all those expressions.
I love it. Melanie.
Absolutely. I got into this line of work, and it doesn't feel like work because I think it's just how I've always naturally existed with people, wanting to connect and help people to kind of find a way to enhance their worlds. And, women as a whole often do so much. We're creative, we're innovators, we have so many different roles often, and mental health is such a critical piece of being able to continue the great work we do, right? Without preserving and activating and being intentional about our wellness, we can't continue to do all those wonderful things. So it's so important to me to help inspire people in general, but especially women as I relate there, to take time out for themselves, to pour into themselves so that we can continue to be great inventors and creators and do all the wonderful things that we do.
Well, thank you so much, Melanie. And I've worked with Julie and Tiffany before, and so have gotten to know them. But I just it's an honor to have you on this panel, and I enjoy getting to know you. And I feel thanks, Julie.
I got into this work because it was personally important to me in my journey. I started going to therapy as a teenager, and it was transformative in my life. And so that started me on this journey of wanting to give back to other women what I had received. And that's kind of where my passion comes from, is my own journey. And also I have a mom and I have 5 sisters, and so women, and I have 3 brothers too, but we're talking about women. So I love connecting with women. I grew up connecting with women, and that's kind of where my passion lies. So this is just really personal for me. And I think it's important for the reasons it was important to me. It helped me develop my unique sense of self and the ability to reflect on my own thoughts and feelings and use them for good, to make my life better instead of to self-destruct or to make myself smaller. And so that's why I do this work.
Thank you, Julie. Tiffany, you already brought up a little bit about how you define emotional health, and I'm really interested based on what the other two said. Do you want to, Melanie, let me throw this to you first. How do you define emotional health?
Wow, I love talking about this because I think for so many people, especially with some of the cultural work that I do, I was just discussing this with a few psychologists last night, is like, how do we bring the framework of mental health into something we can define and understand, right? And there's so many different ways of defining our mental health, and especially across cultures, right? So yeah. The conversation that we were having was exploring the idea of how other cultures have defined mental health. And I think it's so fascinating because within a lot of, Black spaces, they talk about it's really intertwined with spirituality and faith. In a clinical world, of course, we have a more particular clinical focused way of defining mental health as like our overall well-being, emotional well-being. There's wellness scales around that, right? Like if your mental health is in a positive place, you're typically functioning well, you're able to, have an overall positive mood. You're experiencing life and engaging in a way that you feel like you're, optimally functioning, right? On an emotional level. But there's lots of other references of how people define mental health. And I love to embrace those and find ways of intersecting those worlds so that it can be understood across cultures. The idea of just feeling well emotionally, which does that mean we never have ups, highs, and lows? No, right? But the awareness of where our emotional state is and being able to identify what our positive spaces are. What does that flow look like? What do we need things to look like to feel well? Is that 4 days out of 7 that you're happy? Is that 5 days out of 7 that you feel positive and have a good outlook? Everybody can kind of define it very differently, what their personal mental health looks like. But I would say just the understanding of the emotional elements of how we exist as humans, right? Often we're really in tune with physical health and not often, naturally inclined to check in just organically with our mental health. How am I doing? Am I feeling good about the activities I'm engaging in? Do I enjoy the routines I wake up and engage with? Do I like how my relationships are going with my children or family or partner, interpersonal relationships? And all of those things, at least for me personally, play into my mental health and the framework that I put around mental health.
A broader definition. And Julia, I would love you to address this, but I'm going to throw something out. So we're kind of using, and you're all the experts, emotional health, mental health, kind of the same. Is that the same? And then also health and well-being. So just throwing a little bit in there for you and Tiffany to address. Are they the same? Do we use those words or do they mean different things? Julie, I'll let you go first and then Tiffany.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap. Emotional health, I think, specifically speaks to an awareness of, ability to identify your emotions, to be able to manage your emotions in productive ways that help you improve your life and connect with other people. And then mental health, I think, includes emotional health, but also includes your thoughts and your behaviors. So thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all connected. So being in charge of those and having those work together in a way that is harmonious is mental health.
That's great. And do you say well-being and health kind of are the same thing a little bit, or is one more inclusive, Julie?
I think health and well-being kind of overlap. Well-being is physical, emotional, mental, and health is all of those things as well. That's my point of view.
Tiffany.
I can just really echo what Julie is saying. I think mental, we could really niche it down and say that's cognitive processes, thoughts, firing neurons, thinking errors, the cognitive piece. And then, yeah, the mental health umbrella is bigger than just the cognitive piece. Like Julie said, thoughts, feelings, behaviors are a part of that. And health is a topic we could talk about this whole time. What does that mean? And how do we define health? But really, I want to just zoom out and think about very holistically. Someone can have good physical health, but really struggle with mental health or emotional or spiritual or social aspects. And so if someone, has great mental health, they may not have really great physical health or social health or support systems or access to medical care or living in, poverty. So health is so broad, but it is a piece. I mean, it's all connected.
I love it. And okay, now that we've set the stage and nitpicked a little bit. Let's just move out a little bit. And you know that the Utah Women in Leadership Project, I really focused that work on Utah. So we have to go there. In your experience, what are the most pressing emotional health challenges that you have seen? I know some of you probably do therapy for people outside or programs, but specifically with your clients and the people that you engage with specifically in Utah. Julie, why don't you take this one on first?
Yeah, a big one that I've seen is perfectionism. And perfectionism as defined as like I need to be flawless. I need to have no flaws in my appearance, in my behavior, in my parenting, in my relationships. So that is a huge barrier to mental and emotional health because it's so unrealistic. And there are lots of reasons why I think it's a problem in Utah, but I don't know if you want me to go into that, but so perfectionism is one. And then another one that I've noticed, I call aspirational shame.
Yeah.
So women who've been socialized to focus on home and family, and then have aspirations outside of that, like Susan, you encouraged, and they feel bad about that. Like I shouldn't want a career, I shouldn't want to go to grad school, or I shouldn't want these things because it might threaten my family life. So those are a couple I think that are not unique to Utah, but magnified in Utah.
I talk about it and cite your research a bit on both of those issues. But as I say often, you know, the wage gap and all of these different things really are every place, but we're magnified. And I think that's what perfectionism and yeah, Tiffany, why don't you take on, and then Melanie, I'll have you jump in.
Yeah, I mean, Susan, you said the first thing I wanted to say, which is the wage gap. We are really in a shameful place here in Utah for women. Plastic surgery is an issue I work closely with, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, depression. We have, in 2019, adult women in Utah had almost 30% of us reported doctor diagnosed depression compared to 16% of men. So we're almost double the women dealing with depression in Utah. That's really a piece of the toxic perfectionism that Julie brought up. Yeah. Burnout, identity issues. I have never met a woman on my counseling couch, and I have sat with thousands of women. Doesn't matter if they're married, single, religious, successful CEOs, you know, whatever their development is, the shame of I have to do it all, the lack of boundaries and the socialization of the culture here that like you shouldn't have boundaries and give, this lack of self. Yeah, and perfectionism.
And Melanie, anything to add? I'm sure you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, the things that jumped out at me that Tiffany and Julie shared definitely hold a great deal of weight. Perfectionism is something, and if you're native to Utah, there's just cultural things in the air around expectations of perfection, right? How well you serve other people defines how good of a person you are being, and if you say finding a way to try to say yes to every single thing. And so there's a lot of reshaping and reframing that can happen when you're trying to change lanes and be healthy for you so you can be healthy for other people, where you kind of have to learn different things like the boundaries around am I still a good person if I say no? Yes. Am I still a good person if I'm not, making a dinner for every neighbor every single night? Yes, you are. There's lots of cultural things around perfectionism, and that being performed outwardly, right? Where everyone can see, do you see I'm a good person? Do you see I'm successful? Do you see I'm working out every day? Like all the expectations that are kind of placed. And I think there's some cultural nuances there. I also see a great deal of racial trauma with the focus that I have in my practice in serving the diverse community of Utah. I see a significant amount of depression and suicidality with young people and women that are highly anxious and suffering with depression at great numbers due to racial traumas and fatigue that happens here with some of the disparities in workspaces and trying to fit in and feel welcome and belong and connect in our communities in Utah. So that's a huge contributing factor that I see in my practice.
I'm so glad you are really providing those services for that. I've been in so many racial conversations, and I have to say that I'm not an expert at all. I'm just, I call me a baby in that area trying to understand, but I'm just so glad you provide those insights and services to them.
Susan?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I just wanted to note another pattern that I see in Utah, and it exists elsewhere, but it's this like feeling that my struggles are personal and they're because of weakness instead of because of systems that are broken. So I have depression because something's wrong with me versus because I'm not being paid enough, because I'm doing the bulk of unpaid care, because I'm being discriminated against, because of all of these other things. And so I think we tend to view things as an individual problem instead of seeing it as part of this larger whole.
And that, Julie, that really goes to some of the research generally that says it's been finding studies, so many studies have found this, that women generally, when they have a success, push it out to other people. And when they have any flaws, bring it in. And men are the opposite. It's like, oh, that's somebody else's, or, you know, if it's a negative thing and if it's positive, oh yeah, I did that. So it's interesting how that's not just in Utah, but again, maybe it's magnified a little bit, but that's self-blame. I'm not good enough. I definitely see that really, really deeply. I have lost track of where I'm at in the rotation. You're just going to have to jump in. I did want to ask real quick, are there, I know we talk negative most of the time, right? On what's the struggles, but are there any particular strengths and assets that Utah women can use to really help us with that? I'm gonna throw that out for a conversation. Then I want to dig into some of the questions. There's many questions I see that are coming in. So does anyone have a comment? Hopefully we do have something unique to offer there. Tiffany.
Oh, I could brag about the women in Utah all day. And I think we get a bad rep, and that's not fair. That's part of the patriarchy of the culture we live in. And there's a lot of internalized misogyny towards femininity, towards feminine energy, sexuality, our power, our multidimensionality. And I want to talk about the fact that we have 20 women founders who were featured in UV BizQ's 40 Under 40 this year. Half of those entrepreneurs who are successful and growing businesses were women. We are scrappy. We are resourceful. We are resilient. We're starting businesses. We're social media influencers and entrepreneurs while also making casseroles, taking care of kids, saying yes. Like the women in this state, I wouldn't take us on. Like there is so much grit and determination. I could not be more proud to be amongst women in Utah.
I love that, Tiffany. Any comments from Julie, Melanie? Yeah.
I echo that, Tiffany. I've lived a lot of places. I grew up in Utah, and then, you know, I just thought, oh, the second I graduate, I'm out of here, right? I need to go be, and, you know, I grew up in a transracial adoptive family, and I was like, I just really want culture and all this stuff. You know, I moved to New York. I've lived in DC and in the Midwest, and I have never seen what the fire, the determination that you see in women in Utah. And just like you said, the resourceful, right? You could be cooking dinner and you're finding a way to like do something on the side. You're strategizing a business idea. You may be a work at home mother, but you're also running a business on the side, starting a clothing line, and the support for entrepreneurship is just incredible. I love how you can find, and I've built them also for myself, right? These beautiful, empowering, strengthening communities where you just walk in and you create it, right? You kind of have to curate it for what you want. What do you want to see? What do you want to feel in your, kind of little ecosystem or micro communities that we create? But you can find it and create that, and find people and women who are really ready and willing to uplift other people, encourage you. And I know not everybody has that, because I do know that there's a lot of suffering with loneliness here. But there seems to be so many opportunities that if you are ready to kind of engage, that there's a group that would take you in, or women that will cheer you on, or opportunities, and the entrepreneurship opportunities in Utah for women. I mean, we're showing up globally, right, with businesses that have been incubated in, during the day while kids are at school, kind of thing, which is just amazing.
I have to just tag on and say there really are, and on our website, utwomen.org, we list all the women's networks and groups, and there's about 160. And sometimes it is when you lean in. I've had women that move to Utah and they immediately get engaged, and they're a little more proactive than some, because when you lean in and find your space, there are spaces there, I think. Julie.
Yeah, I echo what Tiffany and Melanie have said. I also think that Utah women get things done. Like if there is a need in a community and someone finds out, like, the networking is like, you can get donations for, money or goods or clothing for the homeless shelter. Like, you just have to text your network, and people show up for each other in ways that better the community. And so we are just networking queens.
So the key is to utilize, well, women don't often, I have found this, maybe, I don't know if you agree or not, but I have found that Utah women have no clue how amazing they are, first of all. And they don't acknowledge that often. But if we could use all of that and connect it with ways to help and improve our mental health, there's a disconnect sometimes, don't you think? What I would love to have you all do now is to all three of you kind of look, if you can, into the chat and the questions and find one that you'd love to jump on. Yeah, Melanie, I know you're on a phone, so maybe I will give you one to start us out.
I got a good one. Someone asked, what are your good starting points or first steps that we can do to work on the perfectionism we feel? This is fresh on my mind. I just did a big perfectionism presentation, and there's actually a new Australian study that came out studying self-compassion and the impact on perfectionism. And the study reported that self-compassion counterbalances the link between perfectionism with both depression and anxiety. So meaning the more self-compassion we have, we lower our rates of depression, anxiety, which reduces perfectionism. It's all connected. And the more self-compassion we have, the less problematic perfectionism we'll have. Because there is some adaptive features of perfectionistic thinking. We're talking about maladaptive perfectionism that hurts you and causes distress. So you want to decrease perfectionism, increase self-compassion, which is going to feel like that magnet resisting each other. Those of us who are perfectionistic kind of suck at self-compassion. So we need to foster this idea of, hey, I'm deserving of grace. May I be kind to myself? Everyone struggles. So self-compassion is the best antidote to perfectionism.
You know what? It's also, I speak about this exact thing I did earlier this week, that there is such a connection between self-compassion and strengthening confidence in anything. So confidence takes action. And if you're perfectionistic, you just spin. And so, wow, I didn't know that, Tiffany, about that connection with other things. So we all need to work on being kind to ourselves, right? Yeah. Forgiving ourselves. Melanie, did you want to jump in on that or any other things?
Sure. Yeah. And I think talking about what does that actually look like, so we hear people say, move away from perfectionism, have self-compassion. And I do a lot of this myself, right? Because, I tend to identify with a little bit of that perfectionist personality of wanting, my house to be really organized, my kids to everything, right? Like homework should be done, uniform should be ironed, like everything should be just right. And reminding yourself, so what does it look like to exercise compassion for yourself? Resetting expectations, slowing down, reminding yourself you're doing a really good job, seeing what's actually happening, right? Instead of like kind of operating in this emotional mind where we're reactive and seeing what's not happening, we're tuning into kind of a more wise mind and kind of actually looking around us and realizing we're doing a freaking amazing job, and actually your kids are fine, and there can be a wrinkle in a shirt, and guess what? You have healthy, happy, well cared for, well loved humans in your life, right? So kind of practicing what that looks like from the moment you get up. Oh, it's wonderful you got up today. Do you have time to go reach some of your goals in the morning at the gym or whatever you want to do? Oh, you do today? Wonderful. That's great. Oh, you don't today? That's totally okay. There's going to be another day to care for yourself. Let's find a different way to care for ourselves today. And just almost self-soothing those loud voices that happen in our head that critique and push our expectations just into this unrealistic space, and kind of calming those voices down and reminding ourselves that we're pretty amazing.
And those voices you're talking about, and Julie, I don't know if you want to go in a different place, but you and I have talked about this before, that women, and there's some biology behind it, ruminate more than men, generally.
Oh,
And that
ruminate,
you're talking about those voices, it's the rumination that we struggle with on and on. Anyway, Julie, I don't know if you want to jump on that or move us someplace else.
There's a question that I think is important. It says, can you define what self-compassion is? And so self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-compassion is how we treat ourselves when we are suffering. So it's how we respond to ourselves. And the research of Kristen Neff outlines 3 components. There's mindfulness. So being aware of, I am suffering, I'm in pain. Common humanity, which is recognizing that pain is what binds all of humankind together. Everyone suffers. And so that we tend to withdraw when we're suffering, and common humanity can help us go toward other relationships when we realize everyone has suffered. And then the third is self-kindness. So that's treat yourself as you would treat a beloved other person who was going through the same thing you are. So those are the 3 components. I highly recommend looking into Kristen Neff's research. And one thing that I do is I will touch myself, like I would touch, so I will, go, it's okay, of course you're upset. I'll touch my shoulder or my arm or give myself a hug, because that's what I would do to someone else who was suffering. I would reach out and so it's how we treat ourselves, not how we feel about ourselves, or how we evaluate ourselves. It's our behavior and our thoughts and toward ourselves.
There's an action there, right, Julie? Like there's an action. It's an action word, right?
Right.
And that helps, doesn't that? I guess I'll ask, because you're the expert. I would think that really affects, as Tiffany was saying, when we're compassionate, no matter if we're struggling with mental health issues, has it been defined, or just struggling with self-esteem, or all the things along that spectrum. Don't you have you found that self-compassion just helps with all of those things? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Any other questions you want to jump on or insights before I move us along? There's some great things here.
I have one, Susan. What's a great way to check in with your own emotional health on a daily basis? And I have 4 questions that I encourage clients, and I do this myself, to ask at least once every day, if not multiple times. And so take a second and ask, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? And at any given time, the ability to be able to answer those 4 questions can help guide the rest of your day. And that is an indication of emotional health. If you can answer those questions, that means you're tuned in to yourself enough to take good care of yourself.
I love that. I'm going to share something just real quick on back to the self-compassion, because I had an experience, it was probably a year or two ago. So on Sundays, I have enormous like journals from growing up. I mean, from early years. Anyway, I'm typing in, and I was at a journal where I was typing one Sunday, and I was in my early 30s, and I get teary-eyed. Okay, I had 2 kids. They were crazy little boys, and I was pregnant, and I went on bed rest at 26 weeks, and we were moving from Portland, Oregon to Southern California. And I was ripping myself apart in this journal. Like, why can't I do more? I'm on bed rest. I have these kids. And I just wept for myself. I wept for that, and it was a good self-compassion. I wept for, how do I say this? A younger version of myself, that I was so hard on myself, and that actually helped me. I don't know if that's a tip for anyone else, to read back through that, and I'm like, what in the heck? I was doing really good, and I didn't give myself any credit. So anybody else before we want to jump in?
Thank you for sharing that, Susan. That's a beautiful example. Like looking back at our past self and what she's been through and all of the things and our perspective. And I think wisdom, right? Wisdom carries us into those different ways of looking at things, thinking, you're actually super amazing. Like, you've got this. You were, back when you thought you didn't have it together, you really had it together kind of thing. But that perspective evolves. And I think there's a journey there that we go on with learning to see ourselves that way.
Yeah. And journaling, I've read a lot on journaling. It's really good for us. Even the physical writing, instead of just typing, there's some good things for us.
Yeah. I have just a thought. Because of the high level of religiosity in our state, we have this weird relationship with humility. So we think that self-deprecation is humility, and it's actually not.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of women that I've seen think that, well, I'm being humble because I'm putting myself down. That is not humility.
No.
That's emotional abusing yourself.
Thank you. I wanted to shift us briefly over to just COVID. I mean, we're still, can you imagine? We're still in the pandemic, but what have you seen specifically during this unusual time in just shifting things? Have you seen a difference, and how has that played out? Tiffany?
I'll jump in. Doing therapy through a pandemic was difficult as someone living through a pandemic, holding space for people going through a pandemic, on top of the rampant racial injustice in the country and the widespread trauma. Like, there's a lot going on. I've seen 3 things that are very clearly taking over. People are experiencing pandemic grief. So not just because we have literally lost people to this disease and literally people are dying, not just grief in response to death, but grief in the loss of predictability, life as we knew it, what we anticipated our future selves being. It's loss. So people are actively grieving without understanding that what they're experiencing, the physical and the psychological effects of grief, that we're not understanding. I don't think that that's what that is, but I'm seeing signs of active grief because of that. Also shame. a lot of people are saying, why am I struggling? What's wrong with me? No one else is taking this as hard as me. How come I'm depressed or having panic attacks, or I'm having trauma responses, or I can't be as productive, or the shame of what's wrong with me? Why am I struggling? Is probably a result of the perfectionism of I shouldn't be having this hit me as hard as it is. So there's shame. And then third is burnout, grief, shame, and burnout from the pandemic. I'm burnt out homeschooling my kids, working from home, being isolated, wearing a mask, not being able to like communicate like I used to. And all of this impacts mental health negatively.
Yeah.
So it's widespread trauma. That's what I've experienced.
And so we need even more self-compassion, right?
Wow.
Yeah, Melanie, I want to specifically have you answer, we did a huge study, 3,600 women answered on the impact of COVID-19 on women at work in the state of Utah. And with many of the elements, we ran them on race. And really were able to see that even stress levels, worry, that many of those things were higher among many of the women of color. Any comments specifically about, well, I mean, you can go where you would like, but I would love your insight on women of color specifically.
Sure. I get emotional just even looking back at it, right? Because there was a parallel pandemic happening for us as Black people in the community, and really should have been for all, right? A parallel pandemic happening. Because as we're navigating so much loss to this, vicious virus and disease, we're also, having a lot of social justice issues kind of reaching ahead of, we're done. So we saw things that most of us have not seen in our lifetime, right? My father-in-law marched with Martin Luther King and was a huge activist and pretty fantastic. And he said, I have not seen the things that went on, the fight, the riots, the protesting, those kind of things in the last 30, 40, years, so not in my lifetime, right? So to see what we saw with this parallel pandemic happening, we would find ourselves as a community at home. There were times I didn't feel safe going out of my home. There were times that I would tell my husband, come home quickly, please come straight home from the hospital. I don't stop at grocery stores right now. Things are just not very safe. So not only were we finding ourselves in a state of trying to protect ourselves from this, from COVID and navigate it safely and wipe down groceries and all these huge changes that we made, we're watching so much deep suffering in our community and mothers crying for their children and worried about violence, and then the repercussions of people who didn't validate those lived experiences, and wishing people could understand what it really felt like. And that can create hopelessness, right? That can create a really low state of mental health. So there was this parallel pandemic happening. So if you imagine from a perspective of what it was like to go through COVID, and then you add physical safety on that other level, you can imagine the hopelessness and despair that a lot of families of color were feeling during that time.
Yeah, and I didn't get it for a little while until I still don't get it all because I'm a white woman, right? But and I can't. But when I started listening to women of color and heard that fear, it just changed me. I'm such a crier right now on this thing. Anyway, Julie, did you have any comments about COVID? And
the biggest thing, or in addition to what's been shared, the social isolation is such a risk factor for poor mental health, right? We know that loneliness is just as much of a risk factor as smoking for like an early death. It is so, it's such a problem. And so we have all been lonely. Everyone has been isolated to some degree from loved ones, from friends, at least for some period of time. And that is a huge problem and puts us all at risk for poorer mental health, because the connection and the attachment with other people is something that helps us stay healthy and happy and emotionally regulated. We help regulate each other. And so having that torn away just on a widespread basis is a huge, huge problem.
So how did all of you, I mean, what kind of, when you have been doing therapy or workshops, what do you recommend for people to, during the pandemic and after, how do you make those connections that are so desperately needed during the pandemic, but in life in general? Who wants to jump in? Tiffany, we haven't heard from you for a little bit.
Yeah, I think therapy is cool, and we should prioritize having a professional in our corner to check in on our mental health. I think it's a privilege for a lot of us, and not everyone has access, but there's a lot more accessibility to mental health skills and tools and strategies out there. So listening to podcasts, getting online courses, attending workshops. So at least you're getting education and support. If you are completely isolated, if we're not allowed to leave our homes for 2 weeks and Zoom's not cutting it, get that additional support. And then of course, finding creative ways to connect and make memories and feel filled up with people, having like virtual game nights and making non-negotiable social dates every week, still finding ways to connect and serve other people as well, getting out of our own head, giving some service, taking, send a care package, write someone an old school love letter. That can help us deal with this as well.
Any other tips from the other two? Melanie or Julie?
I have a sister who is very creative. So she created the pandemic porch. So she created her outside porch and put a couch out there and blankets. And so people could go over there and be outside in winter even and bundle up, and they had like a little fire, and we have to be creative, right? Meeting people outside, and just doing the best that we can. And we are so lucky that we have technology, FaceTime people, Zoom, all of those kind of things. We can still connect even if we're not physically present, or like we can't travel, somewhere to see family or those kind of things. We can still stay connected virtually, which is, I think, such a huge asset during this pandemic.
And I see a question in the chat, and it relates to this, so I'll just throw that in, and that is, how do we, during the holidays can be really great for some people, but they could be really challenging for a lot of people. So any tips around the holidays for women specifically related to connecting with people, but also emotional health?
I'm going to go ahead and toot the boundary horn here for a moment. And boundaries can be difficult for women raised in Utah or living in this culture for a long time. Boundaries aren't part of like the cultural socialization here, right? We're not told to say no and not feel guilty. So I want to empower women around the holidays to think truly, if no one else is in the room and you listen to what you need, how's your body and mind respond to how can I best care for myself this holiday season? Is it hosting 7 parties, really? Or is there maybe a boundary I need to set? Do I need to say no, not this time, or change the amount of time I engage with family, and to prioritize meeting your needs and expressing those for the sake of your mental health? Because there is a really powerful transformation when we say my needs matter too and my boundaries matter, instead of trying to please everyone in our life. We don't self-betray, we reclaim our authenticity, which makes us more able to connect with people. So I'd say set boundaries, honor those needs. You are in charge of the time limits and the amounts and what you do, how much you spend, who you spend time with, what conversations you'll have. Like if your family's making racist comments during the get together, having boundaries. I'm not going to participate in this conversation. This is harmful. I'm actively dismantling white supremacy. Like come in hot with boundaries at these family get-togethers, so to protect you and your mental health.
And maybe it's just age for me, but And I was in positions within my church for years where I had to cook a lot. And I do not like to cook. I do not like to sew. And you know what? I felt bad for a lot of years. And then about 10 years ago, I'm like, I don't feel bad. Don't ask me to bring in a meal. Okay, I'll buy a meal if I need to, but I just can't feel guilty anymore. I don't want to. I did it for too many years. So I'm divulging a little bit too much to the audience.
It's great.
I love the boundaries that you're setting, though, Susan, because I think that's so important to pause and ask ourselves, do I like what I am engaging in? Do I want to participate? There is not this kind of looming requirement that you have to go to this dinner, that you have to cook a Thanksgiving dinner, that you have to do all the things just because you may have been doing them all this time. It's okay to kind of slow things down and assess what are the things that we want to do. And I'm with you on some of those that I just thought, oh, I actually don't like that. And I am the only person making myself do that. So let's do something different. This doesn't have to be this way. And the relief and joy you feel when you are going into something with intention and genuine, authentic desire to do it is so different than when you're pushing yourself through emotion because it's something you've always done or something you should do or that kind of thing. It's very freeing to change those expectations.
With boundaries comes some unhappy family members. And so part of the boundaries is being able to tolerate other people's disappointment, dissatisfaction, and with your choices. So being able to let other people have their response and know that it's not your job to fix or change or make them feel better. And that is one of the most freeing things. And it's a skill that takes practice. It's just letting them, okay, they're disappointed. No one died from being disappointed. It's okay.
Julia, that's really hard when it's your own kids that are the ones. I'll just put it out there.
Or parents or grandkids, or it's really hard. It's really hard, but it's really important for mental health to not take on responsibility for other people's difficult emotions.
Yeah.
So
That right there.
I'm over here snapping. Self-compassion is a great antidote to that sitting with others' disappointment. So let's say you're like, yeah, I'm not going to participate, or we're not going to host Thanksgiving this year. Sorry. Everyone's so upset. For you to give yourself compassion for their feelings of upsetness and not having to caretake that. So for me, that would sound like, this is really hard. Everyone expects me to host 15 parties. So I feel bad, and it's okay that this is hard. I'm not the only one setting boundaries this holiday season. I'm not alone. I'm not a bad person. My feelings matter too. Maybe kind to myself. My boundaries matter. It's okay to say no. So that's how I would practice that while sitting with that discomfort of like, I don't have everyone's perfect approval. You still get compassion.
I love it. Just a few tips from, I want to get to a number of other things. Looking at our time, it's moving along. There's a lot of talk these days about building resilience. So I'd love just a couple of tips from each of you on how you advise, how you coach people, counsel people on that. Let's start with Julie. Let's have you start, and then Melanie, and then Tiffany.
Yeah, it really goes along with what we've been talking about, investing in your own well-being. So when difficult things come, you're able to manage whatever comes your way. So it's connecting with other people. It's understanding and feeling your emotions and processing your emotions. And just the act of labeling your emotion makes the intensity go down. So just saying, I'm really mad, makes you less mad. So being able to do that is key. Also watching your thinking, like what are my beliefs about the situation and how can I shift my beliefs? And then just being really intentional with finding meaning in difficult situations. So like, okay, so for me, I always ask myself, okay, how is this helping me grow into the person I want to become? Like finding meaning in difficult things can really add to resilience.
Thank you. Melanie.
I like the idea of just recognizing too what your needs are and making sure to be continuously filling your bucket, right? So that when things come along that kind of deplete or take extra energy or things along those lines, that there's energy in reserve there. There's emotional capacity to get through hard things, right? We need energy, both emotionally and physically, to fuel resilience. And I think that that's something important to, you know, have our expectations meet what we're pouring in. You know, do we have this to spend on being resilient, right? So there's this whole big picture of like what we pull into ourselves to allow ourselves to try to seek to do the hard work of being resilient in difficult or challenging moments.
Yeah. Tiffany, did you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the topic of resilience and ongoing healing, learning, unlearning. I think we're all in this together. One thing that wasn't mentioned that I'll add, because they already said everything amazing, is helping our nervous systems be resilient and heal. So all of us are really dysregulated and hijacked, living in a chronic state or fight or flight freeze right now. Because of the grief and the shame and the burnout and the pandemic and the racial trauma and the lack of safety in our society. So our nervous systems may be really hijacked, and it's hard to be resilient when you're in just survival mode. So I would encourage all of us to think about, like, every day, how do I introduce some safety and present moment coping into my day? And that can be as simple as doing a deep, deep belly breath to engage your diaphragm. And one hack that helps me regulate my nervous system is I double my exhale. So breathe in for 4 seconds, exhale for 8 seconds. And you'll feel your nervous system begin to regulate, which helps you be more resilient and cognitive and not just emotionally reactive in survival mode. So things like deep breathing, slow exhales, taking a moment to turn off the lights and screens and close your eyes and get present and grounded. The more safe we are in our bodies, the more resilient we'll be able to be emotionally. But if we're not safe, and I really appreciate what Melanie said, like some people are literally not safe and can't find safety in our society. There's a threat looming specifically over people of color, like of actual death, right? How do we find these moments of safety and resilience? Sometimes it might just be breathing, coming back to the present moment, building mindfulness. And all of us can do that. And the other thing I'll say that I think we take for granted is eating food regularly. We know dieting is a big risk factor, disconnects us from our bodies. And if you're eating regularly and nourishing your body and your brain, you're going to be better able to deal and regulate with your emotions. But if we're starving, dieting, over fasting, doing these extreme things, how can we expect to have these higher level functionings of like emotional regulation if we're not even fed? So basic stuff like that, breathing and eating food.
And Tiffany, what I love about that are those, even the breathing thing. I don't meditate well, but I do meditate on airplanes, and I haven't flown that much because you're stuck, but it's in the moments, right? I mean, you could probably do the deep breathing when you're driving or just settling your body down. I mean, moments.
Anytime, like every time you go to the bathroom, practice the breathe in for 4, breathe out for 8. Every time you're at a red light, every time you're washing a dish, like, yeah, we don't need to go levitate on a mountain in lotus pose to be resilient and to have emotional health. It's those just day-to-day moments, reminders. I would set a timer to go off every hour, check in with your breath. Doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, we could do it while we're on this panel speaking, right? It's such a great anchor. You can do it anytime.
And I'm sure the other opposite of eating too, what you said about eating, make sure we're eating, but the opposite during the holidays, probably, my master's was in exercise physiology, so I studied nutrition. And when we overeat and go crazy on sugar and stuff, that can affect our emotional and mental health as well, I expect. Yeah, any other of those, Julie and Melanie, any other tips like Tiffany was sharing? I love that. Just those little tips that might help us.
I love
Melanie?
moving your body. Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to move your body. I really love to introduce people to integrating wellness and what that looks like. And it's not just up here that helps us to feel good. It's moving our body, it's circulation, it's what we put in our body nutritionally, and just kind of all those elements of what goes into helping us feel our best, right? And that looks different for everyone. There's not one perfect recipe for what that looks like. Walking, I love walking. Like, that's something that's very relaxing and therapeutic to me. I think whatever it looks like for you, being intentional about incorporating things that intersect to help you to feel your best.
Hey, I'm looking at a couple of other comments. I've been working them into our questions, but someone talked about crying. So can crying be good sometimes during this emotional, stressful time? Especially this one person said they've been crying more during the COVID. Yeah, Julie?
Totally healthy. It's a release. It's a way of processing emotion, and it's a way of releasing tension from your body and from your mind and your heart. So I'm a big crier. I'm all for it.
Yeah, crying is a coping skill, and it's literal energy leaving your body. Cortisol levels drop, stress hormones are released, and it's a nervous system regulator. And the only reason we have resistance to crying is because, one, it's uncomfortable, and we are uncomfortable with uncomfort. But two, the stigma of mental health, that emotion is weak. So actually it's a radical act, a rebellious act of self-love that fights stigma every time we cry.
Oh my gosh. And if you, and I've studied through the years exercise, of course, and sometimes at the end of my day, I'll be like so stressed and I'll just go out and walk. And that just brings everything down. So I don't know if I've walked and cried at the same time.
Highly recommend.
I have. I'm sure I
have you? That might do it. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. I'm looking, do you see any, we're getting close, but do you see any other questions that you've been dying to answer that someone sent through either on the chat or the Q&A? Want to save just a minute for final advice, but any other things that I've got plenty of questions, but I'd love to have them come from our audience today. There's quite a few that sharing. Yes, it will be recorded. We are recording it. We'll put it out there for those of you that have asked for that.
There's one that I would like to address. He says, I don't have a problem comparing myself to others. I have a problem comparing my children to others. It's the time for college acceptance and scholarships, which everyone seems to be getting. And I'm just trying to get my daughter through high school. It's so hard for me to be happy for others when I can't even imagine what's next for my child. And I think that is such a common feeling. And one of the most helpful things for me personally as a parent of 4 kids is recognizing that my children's lives are not a reflection of my worthiness as a human being. They're not a reflection on my parenting. There are kids that have certain struggles academically, or some of my kids have mental health struggles. And it's not about you. It's like, this is about your daughter's life and how you can help her create the best life that she wants to create for her. And so being able to kind of separate your value and your worthiness as a human from your kids' successes, it's way easier said than done, but it's so freeing just from personal experience.
I'll ask question there. When your kids come at you and blame you for their whatever, what's the best one-liner to say? Melanie's laughing. You've had that.
And I say it, I talk to my kids too. I don't know if it's like a one-liner, but it's kind of like own your own stuff. You know, I've given you beautiful tools. You have wonderful parents. You have a safe and healthy home you're growing up in. If you have something happen, you know, examine what's going on. Is there a choice you've made that's contributed to that? Is this happening? Is just everything happening to you? That may not be the case, right? So I think own your own shiz, you know.
Julie and then Tiffany.
So when my kids complain or blame me for things, I just say, you are right.
Oh.
You're totally right. I messed up, and I have a therapy fund for you, and I will pay for therapy for the rest of your life.
Too.
And what can they say? What can they say?
Yeah. The ownership is important. I will say it is important to say, I apologize to my kids often, and also say, you know, going into this, you have imperfect parents. We are humans who wanted to raise humans. And we absolutely adore you, and we will make a mistake every day, most likely unintentionally, and sometimes they happen consciously, right? So I apologize in advance, and again, yeah, always offering therapy as needed.
All the therapists in the room are like, therapy fund, it's fine. We're all like
having fun. The four of us are having fun. Hopefully the rest of you listening in are having fun too, listening to this conversation. It can be such an emotional conversation. And you know, just bringing that humor in. I guess we haven't really talked about that. But isn't humor
Huge.
like really important?
Oh my goodness, so important. I spent the last like 4 days with a group of 3 friends out of town, and we stayed up late and we howled and laughed and just
good.
It was so therapeutic. It was just like, I'm a new woman now, you know.
Yeah.
It's so freeing to, and I think you just have to laugh at your, like, not take yourself too seriously or not take your life too seriously. It's just like we're all trying to figure this out, you know.
It feels good sometimes to laugh. Sometimes it hurts. I mean, when you laugh that hard, but there's something that happens. I don't know the biology behind it, but I'm sure there's stuff. Oh, Tiffany, you know the biology.
I'm a nerd. I'm a nervous system research nerd, and I'm obsessed with the nervous system, and laughing hard when you're pressing against your diaphragm with those deep breaths regulates your nervous system. And all that means is it helps you get out of fight or flight or freeze or fawn. It gets you back to the present moment. When you're laughing and breathing, it's activating relaxation signals in your literal nervous system. Like, our nervous system runs our life, and it's something we're not conscious of. So laughing hard is a great actual skill that's science-based. You heard it here.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, each of you, I would love to have you just give your final advice. I mean, what can people do? I mean, the title of our session today was Strengthening Our Emotional Health. And all of us, every single one of us, it's not for people that have serious, you know, I mean, it is for people that have serious emotional or mental health issues, but it's all for everyone. So what is your best piece of advice? Let's start with Melanie.
Absolutely. I would say just take time with yourself. Take time to prioritize yourself, even if it's just for a moment each day, so that you know where you're at. I think knowledge is power, and being self-awareness is critical to knowing what our needs are. And take that time as a gift to yourself. You deserve it. Each person deserves to be able to know how to manage their health and be aware of what their needs are, and begin to meet those in any possible way that you can, even if it's just something small.
Thank you so much. Tiffany.
This is my like face tattoo moment. There's one thing I can tell the world. I'm going to go with self-validation.
Okay.
I think the power of validation of self is very underrated. And we need to give it more attention. If simply all you do every day is say, it's okay that I feel this, I do not know a more powerful technique. When we stop gaslighting ourselves and betraying ourselves and stop resisting our emotions and we say, it's okay to feel what I feel. I'm not broken. I'm not a mistake. How I feel matters. Then we can become these like master Jedi emotional people. And when we accept our emotions and validate them, it's the beginning of a really powerful process. So it's okay to feel grief. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to cry. Get your own back, self-validate, and watch the domino effect of good things happen.
Thank you. And Julie.
Every day, have at least one something that brings you joy. Every day, at least one thing, and make that a priority. And it will be transformative, because so often we do not prioritize our own joy. And if we are happy and joyful, we're resilient, we feel better emotionally. And so prioritize your own joy and what you want, what you need. So that's my final word.
Thank you so much for your time, to all three of you. This was a fabulous discussion. So thanks to our sponsors as well, the Utah Education Network, John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. And thanks again to our three panelists. And thanks to all of you for joining and listening today. Have a wonderful day.